wondered why Jesus's disciples, after he ascended, were under so much persecution during the times when the early church came, where there were 3,000 added to their number daily. Who ever wondered why the word, the way, was such a word that caused the religious spirit to want to quench the move of God, but it also caused those who knew who Jesus was, who moved in his power, to rise up and be voices to do what God had called them to do. Have you ever wondered if there are messengers now that are willing to be reformers and revivalists, even if it costs them their platform, even if it costs them, being liked or fame or anything like that? Have you ever wondered if there are other people out there like you, if you're watching this show, that are willing to die on the hill of seeing God bring alignment to his bride and doing what he said that he would do in the Word of God? Well, today I have my good friend Rhema Trayner with me, and she is a fireball. She's a powerhouse, and she's one of those messengers that has a ministry called Revive the Way, and it's based off of that kind of fire that they had in the early church to revive that kind of messenger, that kind of alignment in this hour. Rhema is a powerful woman of God, and I just want to welcome you, Rhema, to the show right now. Thank you so much for joining me. And listen, what I've said is true. You have a fire to see alignment come in. So tell us a little bit just about who you are and what you do and why you're willing to die on that hill.
Yeah. Tell us who you are. What would you die for? It's like, hey, it reminds me of like when I was in Bible college, and you would show up and people would be like, hey, what's God's calling for your life? And you'd be like, whoa, hey, my name's, introduce you first. But yeah, so my name's Rhema and I am based in Atlanta, but I'm from Los Angeles. So I was born in West LA, grew up in LA County till I was 18 years old. God called me very suddenly at 17 years old to move across the world to Australia. I'd never been there. I would say it was the second really significant encounter I had with God in my life.
Wow.
The first was when I was 15 at a youth camp, where that classic, youth camp experience, where you've got that one time a year where people would speak in tongues and give prophetic words. So that was my experience when I was 15. I had this dramatic encounter with God, right? But then really not a lot, transpired from then until I was 17. And then God called me to move. So I went to Sydney and I was there for 3 years, came back to Southern California after that, and then was in New York City for almost a decade. And then God called us to Atlanta pretty recently. And that's where we live now in South Atlanta.
That's so cool. And so Rhema and I are literally from two different worlds. She is like city girl of all city girls, and I am country come to town. So it's really fun being your friend, Rhema, because it's like, listen, guys, it's so funny because my sister-in-law, Jessica, will tell me, now, Tammie, Rhema's from up north. And I'm like, but I'm from the South. And we do everything slow. And Jess is like, but they do everything fast.
It's like when we travel together, Terry, I was laughing at last time we were together and I was like, all right, cool. Where's the coffee? Where's the restaurants? Get the stuff out. What are we doing? You're like, how are we getting there? And then everybody's like, whoa. You're so like city. I'm like, good food. Life's too short. Like, gotta have coffee, Yes.
You always need that spice in your life to have that friend that's like the polar opposite. So Rhema she's amazing. She's a very driven individual. She will make something happen in a moment. I think that's probably her strength and her weakness. And it's honestly, Rhema, why I love you. It's why I like running with you, because I do know that you have a tenacity about you that, come hell or high water, you're going to do what God has said to do. You went from Sydney to California to New York, and you have been quite the world traveler. You sound like you've been pretty busy. You've been pretty active in ministry. And to a lot of people out there, they're like, man, in, she's living the life, she's doing the thing, she's like, she's really walking what she's called to do. But you and I both know that it's not been an easy it's not been an easy journey for you. And I think those that are watching probably need to know what you have done to persevere, to push through, because it's not literally, like they say, it's not all wine and roses. It's not all, you walking in your destiny, walking in your calling. What does it look like for you to be a woman who's a pioneer? And, that is a lot of traveling and a lot of moving. And, what does it look like for you to be a person of perseverance?
I think that for a long time, I've had to really have a lot of resilience, because there's no such thing as suddenly anything. Mm-hmm. God, I think that these days there's a lot of suddenly and instant things, but not things of God, yeah. Right? So when God is developing us and processing us and bringing us into what I'll call maybe pinnacle moments of our life or ministry or of our journey with him, those pinnacles had like a 7-year track to get, to what everybody sees. It's like the iceberg thing. And then people see this little part on the top. They're like, oh my gosh, like, where'd you come from? Like, what? Like, whoa, never heard of you. It's like, well, yeah, like nobody did for like 10 years when I was doing all the same stuff, So I think that there's an illusion sometimes when we only see the tiles of someone's life, yeah. Of the price and the journey that it took to get there. I think that I've always been really focused on a long-term vision, always, like since I can remember.
That's good.
Because I think I would have quit a lot of times if I didn't have enough vision to see that even though this moment like really sucks and I don't want to be in it, I know that I've lived through my worst moments so far, and I'll probably live through this too, and so there's like there's a sense of perseverance because I'm not at the end. Like one of my I'd say like core scriptures is in Isaiah where God says, I'm the God from the end to the beginning. Wow. And so it's this picture of him looking from the end to where we're at, being like, yep, you're good. Like, keep going. That's good. You're good. You're going to make it. I didn't give you that prophetic vision because there's no way it could happen. I saw this moment, like, keep going, And so for me, there's always been a sense of long-term vision. I mean, when I was, when we lived in New York, I had a loft in Tribeca, and we lived in this like beautiful loft for 5 years, on the top floor of this building. And it had like 15-foot ceilings. It was just such a cool space. And I had the word eternity created, like Arthur Stace in Sydney. I don't know if you know this story, but maybe 30, 40 years ago, he was a survivor from, I believe, World War II. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there. But he couldn't read or write. He grew up in a brothel, like some kind of crazy story like this.
Wow.
Or grew up like working in a brothel, and ended up getting saved, couldn't really read or write. So he would go around with a piece of chalk on the streets of Sydney, and he would write the word eternity on the ground.
Wow.
All over the streets. And so this was something he felt was his calling from God. And it was like a thing in Sydney. Like people would see it all the time, and they never knew who was the man who was the person. They didn't know who it was, who would write the word eternity on the ground. And during the, I think it was the year 2000, for New Year's, off the Sydney Bridge, they did his eternity in the fireworks. How he would write it in this like script. Wow. And so I had that cut out of like acrylic, almost like this giant sticker. It was like 7 or 10 feet wide. And I put it on the floor of the loft so that anytime like someone walked in, they saw, and it was white like chalk. So it said eternity across the floor of my loft, because that's how much I've always just had a view of the long term. And I think that, I think God, when he knows that we're going to go through suffering in our life, he probably helps us, with some of like deeper core values.
Yeah.
Where when we're going through times of trial, times of like real testing, that we understand that there's an eternal perspective in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that eternal perspective is so important for me as well. Like that was one of the core things that has caused me to stick. When I really grasped eternity, when I really understood we're eternal and that this is not, this is not it. This is not all there is. Like there's not this strong push on me to accomplish everything today. It's the reality of eternity that kind of has caused me to persevere too. That's such a powerful story. And, you just talking about that really leads me to my next question. Like I mentioned this in the beginning, what would you die for? But, what is that message for you that you really like? You're like, I'm going to die on this hill. It's not something that is negotiable for me. And just a little while, we're going to talk about things that you have changed your mind on that have caused you, to be where you are today. But like, what is this core message for you that, you're like, I'm not going to quit preaching this. I'm not going to quit teaching this. I'm not going to quit living this.
Yeah. For me, I've always had a deep love for the church, always, since I can remember. Mm-hmm. And, when I was younger, I thought that looked a lot different. Mm-hmm. I was very zealous to build the church and, to run after this idea, of what I understood as building the church, doing this for God and all of that. Since God has radically shifted my understanding of what it means to build the church, but still that desire and that belief that a strong church can transform the world and will transform the world, that has always been like my driving force. And then as I became, older in that, and God began to, reform and help me understand who am I in that picture, because there's, I always again, that macro perspective, right? So I know that God is doing really big things on the earth. All of them don't concern me, right? But what does concern me and what is he wanting me to do in, his restoration of all things? And as he births, the sons and daughters of God that the earth is crying out for, like what is the role in that? And since I can remember, I've always known that I was unique in the way that I was able to hold on to the word and to the spirit at the same time. Yeah. And as I've been, grown into the faith and in leadership and, in different seasons, I've been in many different streams of the church, many different crowds, I never really had like, that's our stream. And like, we're from that stream or we're from that crew or whatever. Like we really have floated and not floated, but we've gone in and out of different circles, like within the church. And I think that was so intentional by God, because in every circle, there was wealth, there was great, things that people really valued. As we know, like the body is diverse and there's different expressions and different beauty, when you go into different streams and different camps. But one thing I noticed, in my own journey was that it helped me to have these established values that didn't really perfectly align with any stream, because I was able to like take strength from different places. And so the word and the spirit was always a very, very core value for me, especially when I got into my mid-20s and God, started taking me really deeply into the things of the spirit, which I didn't really have a grid for, but I was extremely open to. And I had already really been deep in the word for a long time before that. So really holding on to that tension and bringing alignment has been a key thing for me. Probably about 12 to 13 years ago, I had a dream, and I was standing in this open area, and there were 3 houses. And inside each house was a specific person who had a problem with their back. And I would go in one house at a time and I would fix their back. And so in the first one, I went into a house and it had a really young Asian girl, and she had a spinal problem. So I fixed her spine, prayed for her spine came into alignment. I went into the next house. There was another type of person in that house, same thing. Went into the last house, and there was a really old man, looked probably 100, and he was laying on the floor, and he had an issue with his spine. Prayed for him. His spine came into alignment. And then I heard the voice of God 3 times. Right? This is so dramatic. I heard the voice of God 3 times, thunder from the sky, but I did. And he said, authority over the spine 3 times.
Wow.
And so I didn't understand at the time, like what that meant. But then I would get all these, prophetic words, like a chiropractor to the body of Christ, like bringing things into alignment, because when your spine is in alignment, everything else in the body can flow, and so that's really how I feel like God has begun using me a lot more now. It took a lot of years of preparation and a lot of years where, and, we've probably even talked about this before, but where I felt like I was learning and growing and plowing and going into these different like depths of things that weren't even for then, it was for now. Yeah. And it wasn't relevant yet. Right. How God was preparing what he was wanting me to do and say. And again, I think my whole life is a journey, and just like yours and everybody's, it's not about like dreaming about what's your destiny is, like this moment you get to. But like I said before, I think there's these moments we get to where there's a point of release or a big shift where the prophetic promise comes to pass, where God unlocks a new season, where there's a different kind of fruitfulness, right? There's these different moments in our life. And so I think now, entering a moment that's more like that, it didn't come without like a crazy price and a crazy season prior, So, the long-term vision and having that sense, okay, God is going to use me to pull things back into order. And so that, some people love that and some people don't love that.
I really think that you have to be fashioned by the Lord to enjoy that. I mean, to be honest, like change is one of the most difficult things for us as humans. We're literally creatures of habit. In the natural, I was thinking about this the other day. I do CrossFit, and in the CrossFit box in the gym, like everybody's got their space and they go to the same place every single day. And it's like, if there's somebody new that comes in, you're like, it's like it's in church, somebody's sitting in your seat. Yep. It's like so weird. And I was thinking about this the other day because I went into my noon class and it was full, and there's normally like 5 people in the room. And I was like, I don't even know where to go. Like, I don't even want to be in here right now with all these people, but I was thinking, how ridiculous are we? We're such creatures of habit. We don't like change. We don't like somebody to get into our space, but yet God calls us to be reformers. He calls us to institute alignment and institute change. But the catch of that is, Rhema, like we still get into, this is how it's supposed to be done. Even us reformers, right? This is how we like it. This is how it's supposed to be done. This is what the new wineskin is. This is what the new wine looks like. And the truth is that changes over time as we grow and mature. And so we have this vision, we have this word from the Lord, you got a dream, and I have a dream as well that God gave me many years ago. That's like, it's core to me. I watched that thing play out over the span of years, but it's developed. Since I had the dream, it looks totally different than what I thought it was going to look like. It's probably been 10, 12 years since I had that dream. And I'm sure it's the same way for you. Like, what is it that has changed for you? And even as you're talking, like, think about those that are listening to you, some that are younger in this, and they're like, man, I'm called to reform. I hear you, Rhema. Like, I'm called to bring alignment. Like, it's time. I'm so tired of everything being out of alignment. I even see like some of you guys, you're like, yeah, the old man, he needs his back aligned. Some of you are thinking that, and some of you older guys, you're thinking like, these young folk need to, chill out and slow down. But the truth of the matter is we're all growing in this. We get a blueprint from heaven, and then God gives us more. What has changed for you? Like, what did you think was core 5 years ago? And now, you realize that you were wrong in some of those areas, but you've matured in this vision.
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I would say even when God like brought us into doing some of the things that we're in right now, again, and for 7 years feels like it was really almost just test and listen to the Spirit, try it this way. That didn't really work. Switch that. Mm-hmm. Like that one didn't really work. Okay. Like, and it was learning. It's like, you have to get that DNA right before God starts to multiply something.
Right.
It was a time of like constructing DNA, I think, for 7 years. And I think when you begin on a track like that with God, you have to protect. By nature, you protect what you're building. You protect the blueprint. You protect what God has told you because you're still figuring out what it is. Right. And so there's a different sense of like, you know, if somebody's like, hey, well, that's not right. You're like, no, like, this is all that's right. You know what I mean? It's like, this is all that I'm doing. This is the only thing that, you know, but once I really feel like God started to establish, this is what I want you to do. This is what it's meant to look like. This is the blueprint, and feeling that more settled, you know, then you've been like, and actually this isn't all there is. Like,
right.
Hey, like open up your eye, you know, because I think just because of the nature of my personality, my calling, I can also get very tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Like, which I think a lot of leaders are like that.
Yeah.
That what God has shown us is the thing that we're going to run like a bull to a red flag.
Right.
And so I think a part of maturing has been to back up and see the whole stadium and be like, yep, that's my red flag. But I'm also going to understand that God is taking a whole lot of people to a place right now. I'm one of million pieces of that, right? And so I'm not going to see it all, but I am going to be faithful to what I do see. Mm-hmm. I am going to be faithful to what my assignment is.
Right.
But I have to understand that, like, beyond that, I'm not responsible for someone else's assignment. I'm just responsible to bring, you know, what I have. Mm-hmm. So I think that has helped me as I look at other people. I mentioned the other day in a post that I did about the new wineskin and about how God had really been taking me on a journey even of being willing to go back into like what I would consider the institutional church. You know what I mean? Because God pulled me out of that 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And started to reframe and reform how I think about church and, you know, even how we build and what we do, and really, you know, kind of brought a lot of, just a lot of disentanglement from all that stuff. And so going back in there was something I didn't expect, but God has now been calling me back, you know, like into those spaces. And it was like suddenly I started getting invitations to go back into like churches. And like, I would like message like twice now. I've asked the pastor, I've been like, are you sure? Like, did you read like the stuff I write? Like, do you know like who I am? Like, or like, you know, and like, they're like, yeah, because I think that we're all maturing. Mm-hmm. I think that we're all coming into a place where people are not being threatened anymore by like God is doing something new. I think this phrase was so extremely threatening 5 years ago.
Right.
Like the establishment. It's like, what do you mean God's doing something new? There's nothing new under the sun. And it was like, well, actually there is. And that was very threatening. But I think now there's like, God has been showing me how much that transition, you know, of what he's doing right now, how he's bringing everybody to like this place of humility, but we're all starting from different points and we're all like coming in, like leaning in. Jesus, what are you saying to us? Like, what are you saying to the church? And I think that most people, a good amount at least, really do want to follow Jesus wherever he's going. Yeah. For some people, it's going to feel harder than others because of the cost. Yeah. But I think that most people, most leaders within the body do want whatever Jesus wants for the church. Now, then there's a process of us coming into alignment with that, which may be really painful, really hard. We might want to say no, and some people might say no, right? So, but I think seeing the paradigm differently, where everybody's track to get to, hey, where are we going? Everybody's track to that doesn't look the same. And when we pin somebody in a moment of their journey, it's really, really dangerous for us to judge their moment. Right. Because I was in moments from time to time in my life, and I know what it feels like to, to feel judgment from people about like, oh, well, that's who you are. That's what you're doing. That's this or that. and I've probably done that to other people too, especially earlier on.
Yeah.
So I think God is just, he's widened the view. I think a widened view is part of maturing.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. For me personally, just to connect with that, for years, even when I was planting, when I had my own place and my own space in South Carolina, I was going through the same years you were talking about, where it was just like reformer, like the institution, or, the institution of church is changing, we're trying to get outside of the box. Even inside of that, the Lord would speak to me, you're pigeonholed. He would speak that to me. You're pigeonholed. You've pigeonholed yourself. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we're cutting edge on what we're doing. Like, I don't, because, when the Lord speaks, he's right. But at the same time, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't even imagine that there's something else more, because I'm already like getting my head cut off for what I'm doing right now, spiritually and in the religious, world. But now on this side, Rhema, I see how God was literally taking pioneers and reformers, and he was mass moving people outside of the box, but almost to reform us, and then to send us back in, because, I'm in a season now where I'm a bridge, I'm a bridge in between. And I used to pray, because the Lord showed me that he was bringing people out of the wilderness. And I saw the death and destruction behind me, because we don't think about when the Israelites left the wilderness that an entire generation died. Like, we don't understand that, but it hit me so hard. Like, God, I don't want an entire generation to die in the wilderness. God, would you have mercy? And so I find myself now in this place where I'm a bridge in between, and it's not an easy place to be, but that was part of what he was talking about. Like, I was pigeonholed in my own, like I was never in like certain streams or circles, but I had become that. I had become in my own stream, my own circle of people. And to be honest, like, we were church haters. We didn't know it. We wouldn't say that. But because we loved the church and we loved the bride, but we were trying to reform something. And those of you that are like out there right now, and you're like, yeah, but like, I'm starting to see the both and some of you are still pigeonholed, and God's calling you to see bigger. Even recently, the Lord's told me, like, I gave you like the blueprint, but you only had the left-hand corner of it, Tammie. Give that back to me. And I'm just like, what? He's doing something where he's answering our prayers, that we didn't want a generation to die in the wilderness. And we also didn't want the prodigals to die out in the streets. And so he's bringing the two things together, and he's marrying zeal and wisdom. He's marrying the word and the spirit. He's marrying, the local church with what I'm calling the underground church of America. It's the underground church, the house church movement. I said earlier in the broadcast when we started, it's the way, it's the Antioch movement, it's the restoration, it's really not a new thing, it's an old thing being restored, the restoration of the way. And in that, there's a large remnant of people that are saying, like, I'm sick of not moving in the power of the promise of the word of God. And they're starting to say, like, show me the way, show us how to do what the word of God says. And that's the name of your ministry. It's Revive the Way.
Yeah.
And, just as we're kind of getting close to the place of a close here, I do want you to share about that a little bit. Like, why did you name your ministry that? And what would you say to those that are, they're in that in-between place and they're getting their vision widened? What is the new old thing? What is the new wineskin? What is the new wine? What is the way? Yeah. And are we willing to die for it the way they were?
Yeah. So, real quick, I'll touch on the things that you mentioned, because I think anyone who has a reformative calling, there is an uprooting and a planting, a destruction and a building, right? So there is a sense where, usually we identify what needs to be uprooted and what needs to be destroyed. And that is the beginning of our calling as a reformer. Right. So that will always be what we see and identify, and what we begin to move in first is the tearing down and the uprooting. But then the call is to build and to plant. And so to me, when you're beginning to operate in the fullness of that you are both uprooting and planting, that you are destroying and building, like that's what the fullness of the Reformation call looks like.
Right.
And I think a lot of immature people just get stuck in the tear down and destroy.
Yeah.
But we've got to move into but there's something to build and something to plant, because you have to show the new life and the construction of God. Like, what is God building? What is he doing? Because the things that you're destroying and the things you're uprooting, new life has to come forth.
Exactly.
There has to be something to move into. There has to be new food to eat. There has to be a new thing. And so, when God spoke to us in back in 2015, or actually the very beginning of 2016, he spoke to us about what we were going to be doing, which we didn't understand. And he started to talk to us about house church, started talking to us about like, I'm doing a new thing, this kind of language where I'd see it spring up in the wilderness. I see it in the desert, doing a new thing. We were like, what? Like, we had no idea. And he said, Isaiah, revive the way. And even this concept, like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought it was strange. I didn't understand. I was like, is that like a thing? Revive the way, but like, I was like, well, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. There's a new way to be. I know at Antioch, they were called followers of the way, they became as Christians. And so this concept of reviving the way, which the way is Jesus himself. It's the return to the person of Jesus, the centrality of Jesus in the body of Christ. So it's not so much return to a method, though there are ways that we function, right? In order to follow the way, there are ways that are better than others. And so we can't go all the way over here like, well, no methods are best. And we can't go all the way over here where structure everything, right? So yes, we're following the way as a person, and he's taking us there. But when God first spoke to us, it was from Isaiah 61, and he said, they will rebuild the ancient ruins. They'll revive, or they will restore the places long devastated. They will revive them, though they've been destroyed for many generations. And this became like a foundation verse, that we would restore the ruined cities and revive the places that have been destroyed for generations. And so that really is, what I believe God has put, the apostolic mandate, on me, and what we have begun to pioneer, as we plant house churches, and, even over the last year, to see just the territory that God has opened up. Because when we started doing house church, it was very unknown. It was small, like no one really understood, like including us, why this was important. And so it just was like doing something you didn't understand for like years and years and years. And then until finally you're like, oh, okay. I get what we were doing now. I get why, you've led us here. And so we began, doing that, but then now it's really exploding, and many nations are opening up, and strategic alliance with like other leaders. I mean, just in our leadership community, there's, more than 100, fivefold leaders like walking together and being equipped and growing. And, we're planting a lot of churches in a few different countries now. And, it's so cool to be in a season of fruitfulness after, a long time of being in a season of real, like boots on the ground, paying a price, not a lot of fruit, believing God, the eternal perspective. And really that was all I had, was like, one day this is going to make sense. Yeah. One day this is going to matter, and I think I had to decide a long time ago that like obedience was success.
That's good. So
it was like, yes, I have this like prophetic vision that I believe God has shown me. Yes, it's hard that I haven't seen that yet in real life, especially when you see like other people seeing it in real life, like what it was for them. And you're just like, they started seeing that in real life, like after 2 years. I'm like on year 7, and I'm still like, I'm still kind of just seeing nothing. So like, help me understand, but keeping that long-term prophetic vision and like the dream that God had put in our hearts. And I think for me, it was like, if I stay obedient and I don't quit, I'll win.
Right.
And so that's been my journey, and then coming to this place, I you asked about the way, and, even with the gathering that we're holding in April, that has really also been quite a journey for me because, we went through a few years of really challenging, just warfare and refinement, in our own life and in our ministry and, just a time of believing God, but it took a lot like out of me and I really didn't want to do anything anymore.
Yep.
Genuinely.
Been there.
I did a conference in like 2021. It was cool. Like, I think from an intercession standpoint, it was a lot more powerful than from a practical, standpoint because of what it cost.
Yeah.
It cost to bring that to pass and for that word to be fulfilled was so costly. And so I think it took so much out of me that, and part of that was me learning how not to strive. Part of that, there's so much in it that I don't have time to go into, but it was a part of my refinement and a part of God maturing me. But then when it came time to do it again, I was like, no. No. And then God started to speak these words to me. He said, things are going to come full circle. And he said, this time is not last time. I want you to try again.
That's good.
And then I said, no, thank you. No, I'm just kidding. But then I said, okay, well, what does that look like? Because if this time isn't last time was real, I don't want to go through that again. And, and you start to feel the trauma and the different, things that you felt the last time you tried that, the last time you stepped out, the last time you did a big thing. And it was that was not what I thought it was going to be. And God has really been just so kind to me and to my heart in this process of coming to now the conference that we're holding in April, because, it's just been a sense of okay, following every step and I don't feel stressed out. There's a lot to do, but I'm feeling like the striving and the pressure and all of that I had last time. And really I lost weight. I was it was just, I wasn't mad about that part, but it just was, the point was it wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy. Stress, so much stress. And so I've just been learning how to walk in. One of my friends gave me a prophetic word in 2022, the beginning of the year. She said, God is teaching you how to have a rested run. She said, I see the word arrested run, arrested, you're going for a goal, but also a rested run.
So good.
And he said, he's teaching you how to run from a place of rest. And you've only known how to run from a place of running, being really strenuous, tired, go. And so God really is teaching me that. And it's still been a process because I'm very much like a breaker, I'm going to if that wall's I will not come down. I'm you will come down. You know what I'm saying? And if with my bare hands, you're going to come down and it doesn't, it's happening. Right.
I will attest to that you would probably tear it down with your bare hands.
I'll tear it down with my teeth if my hands get away, right? It's there's those, God knows he builds us for what we're built for. Okay. Yeah. So I am for my assignment. I'm the one for it. But at the same time, it's turning the weaknesses of that into strength.
Right.
Which is a maturing process. To learn what to do and what not to do, to learn what to tear down and what to leave alone,
right.
To learn when a roadblock is the brook drying up and when a roadblock is something that you have to press and you have to be get the water, something's blocking the brook, walk up the stream, figure out what's blocking, you know what I mean? Versus being this is a sign, walk away, so we have to learn that. And that's the process. But I'm just really blessed, honestly, right now by just the wind of God and to feel grace and favor and be walking in that now and to know the difference between walking in striving and difficulty to be walking in, favor and rest. It's been so much different. And I'm so grateful.
If you are able to say to one thing to those that are watching right now, that are in that season of learning how to walk rested or run rested, what would you say? What is your biggest takeaway that you could tell them that will save them some of the pain that you've experienced, and I think my answer to that is kind of, we want to save you some of your pain, but you're probably going to experience it. But
you have to have some, because suffering's a part of
it. But what would you say, like, wisdom wise, these are pioneers, burning messengers. You guys are burning because you have a message, and it's like shut up in your bones. But that burning burns you sometimes. Like, what's your wisdom, Rhema?
Believing in the timing of God has been massive. It took me a long time to accept no for an answer, to accept no from God, to accept no
way. I can't see that at all.
Right? Like, I feel like today someone's like, no, I'm like, great, walk away. I'm not even asking a second time. Like, I've learned the power of no and how much it protects me from things. And I think before no was always maybe. Because when you're somebody who wants to break things open, you're gonna take no as a maybe, maybe's a yes, and you're always just gonna break and push, and it's like that's your auto,
right?
And so you've got to learn how to pause and how to seek, right? Which that's where the intimacy piece comes, where it's like, God, how, not just what, how, how, how do I not waste time and energy? And I think trusting the timing of God has been massive for me, and trusting the Father, because there's three things that God started speaking to me about a while ago that are so key for every voice, for every person who has a message, for every person who has like something that is going to shift something that's going to change, something that's going to reform. There's always three things that have to come into order. The messenger themselves, which that's like that period of suffering, that's refinement, that's pruning. God's going to bring you into order. And if you don't like it, well, then you'll just quench and stifle and minimize your calling. But like, if you lean into that and you allow him to like refine and bring you into order, then the messenger is right. But then the message has to be right. He has to tune what is the actual thing you're supposed to do and say. Because as a person who loves to do and say, you might do and say all kinds of things, but there's a time where God has to bring that into a focus so that you actually understand like what it is that you're supposed to influence and do, right? Like, and then there's the timing, because not whether you're ready and your message is fine-tuned, the people might not be ready to hear you. There's things that I say today that people are like, whoa, 400 shares in like a day. And I'm telling you, I said the same thing 4 years ago and maybe got 2 likes and then 3 DMs about how wrong it was. So I'm saying like the timing has to be right too.
Amen.
It's not just like, I'm ready, release me. And I wasn't ready anyway, but it's like, it's not like, God actually is bringing all 3 of those things into like a fine tuned moment where he's like, now. And that's when we stop wasting energy. That's when we stop striving. That's when we really trust in like his provision. And when he begins to bring alignment, we don't have to fight for relationships anymore. We don't have to fight, things just begin to be filled with grace. And I think that's the difference of understanding when those 3 things are in alignment. When it comes to those major shifts, and for a reformer, you're wanting to see the break. You're wanting to see something break open that God's promised you. You're wanting to see, the prophetic promise fulfilled. It's like, it's enough to hang on to it, but you don't want to hang on to it for your whole life. Right. Like your life is the journey. There'll be another prophetic promise that you get after that one that then you're, holding on to. So, it's not just about one ultimate goal that we're, going toward, but definitely there's a sense of like wanting to see the promise fulfilled. Like the Caleb, give me my mountain. Like you want to see the thing that God said. And so in order to see it, it's like, we've got to trust like the process in us. We've got to trust the timing, and we have to trust that like when we get there, we're going to have the right message and build the right thing.
That's right. That's right. That's so good. And it's all that, everything you just said is so incredibly important. Just, we could totally make that a podcast in and of itself. Those that's the gold of the wisdom, guys, because if you do not understand the different parts that she just shared, you're going to crash and burn. And you've got to understand why. For me, that's always been important. Like, why the timing? Why the wait? Why the burning? And some of the things that she just said are so important, because you are going to get vision on top of vision. You're going to get you're going to get strategy on top of strategy. Some of you guys are extremely prophetic, but some of you guys are very apostolic, and that those two things together turn into this collision of strategy and promise. And if you don't understand the season that you're in, you will quit. You will feel you'll turn into an orphan's heart. You'll feel like the whole world is stacked against you. The world, the church, and Satan all hate you. And it's real, guys. And I think that's something else that God's bringing back. This is real. This is vulnerable. This is what we've walked through. This is what you're walking through. And a lot of us are walking through it together. And that's the beautiful thing of where God is moving the body of Christ right now, is out of that place of wearing a mask into the place of vulnerability, so that we can learn from each other. And, we're going to actually make more traction this way, because everything she just shared is talking to your heart, but it's also not about you. It's about the body. It's about, we've been talking about, the new wine and the cluster of grapes. It's about the body. It's about you play a part in this, but it's not all about you. And if you understand that, you're going to be so much more fulfilled in what God's called you to. Rhema, this has been absolutely incredible. And some of this content, I believe, is going to really, really change the way that some of these messengers that are listening, and some of those that really don't even know that they are messengers, are going to begin to step into who they are. So I believe this content is very, very, very important for the hour that we're in, for the moment that we're in. Guys, we're doing a gathering together in April called The Way Together. I really want to encourage you to come out and be a part of that. The registration is free, but I saw that Rhema posted that it is 75% full. And that's at the moment that we're recording. When you guys see this, it may be more full. But we do want to encourage you to come out and be a part of that. And there's other things that you're doing, Rhema, and things that we're doing together. We're really just enjoying, equipping, and preparing you guys to do and be who God's called you to. So, Rhema, tell us a little bit more about what you're offering right now, as far as, just equipping is concerned, other than, the event and more events that we're going to be doing. So The Way Together is not it. This is really new wine, cluster, team. We're going after this thing globally.
Yeah. I know you and I are going to London together in July. We're doing a conference in London. And then my movement is doing a conference in Brisbane, Australia this year in June. The 22nd to the 24th. And so that one I think is already a third full as well. So if you're in Australia or in the Australia, New Zealand, area, would love to invite you to that. All of this is on my website, revivetheway.com. And then I also, on my Instagram, which is just my name, Rhema Trayner, I've got a link tree with all kinds of links to my courses that I do. I have a holistic deliverance intensive that I'm doing in a few days with just several friends of mine who I think are really key in this space as well. I mean that's from counseling to deliverance to inner healing. We're talking about the full spectrum of freedom, to help equip people so that they're not just in steel running around trying to cast out every demon that manifests. Because I'm telling you, we're entering a season where manifestations are going to be pretty wild, just in general. And so if you don't understand how to operate in wisdom, you can actually make some pretty serious messes. So just trying to bring people into further maturity in that. And I did a course even called Manifestations. It's honestly my most successful course I've ever done. So many people have signed up for it. I think it's nearly 600 people signed up for that within a month and a half. Because it's such a good course to give you a theology around the spiritual realm and how it intersects with the natural. And so I've got some stuff like that. I've got a course about the new wineskin, just like kind of coming into a new paradigm of like, what is God doing in the church? I have an inner healing and deliverance course that's 10 weeks long. It kind of teaches you tools for self-deliverance, like working out, how to ask the Holy Spirit questions. How do you process through what's going on in your heart? How do you ask yourself, what's the root? So different things like that. And you can find all that in my social media would be like the best place.
Cool. All that is amazing. You are amazing. And I'm excited to see what God is doing with you right now and how he is bringing you to the forefront. And guys, this woman has gold in her, and it has been refined in the fire. So she's not just talking to you from the place of like, this is where I am and this is what I'm doing. Like she's living her now testimony. And I think that's something that the Lord is really shining on right now. Not our yesterday testimony, our now testimony, what we're walking through now. So thank you so much, Rhema. Guys, we're going to put all of that stuff, all of her links, information in the description. And we want to encourage you to, if you're watching this later on, if the Revive the Way or the Way Together has already happened, go ahead and connect with us. Jump into any of these courses, and you're going to begin to see more and more people that are coming together to equip and to train and to teach and to bring together in community the different aspects, the different streams of what God is doing. And I believe that he's called us to get out of the streams and jump in the river. And so it's time to get in. It's time to go over your head. It's time to get connected with other people. And remember that you don't have to burn alone. This is not a Lone Ranger kind of thing. And I know you feel that way sometimes, but God is calling you in and he's calling you out. That's what the apostolic is. He's calling you into the fold, and then he's sending you out into the world. And we want to do that with you. And so thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to share this content, to encourage other people, and to go and follow Rhema. We will see you again.